What up, HyperChange? Welcome to another episode. Today we've got an epic interview. We're going to be scheming on SpaceX, Tesla, the future, space AI, the Terafab, so much to cover. I've got two very legendary guests here, Amy and Larry. Welcome to HyperChange. So excited to have you both. So I think we should just kick things off with a crazy question directed to Amy, which is about this $100 trillion market cap and potential for SpaceX. And that's something that you've been posting about on X that I think a lot of people probably get thrown by because that's the size of the entire world's economy right now. So how does SpaceX, what are you even talking about when you're saying that SpaceX could be a $100 trillion company?
Yeah, well, that all comes from AI and robotics. So if you look at AI taking over a lot of the functions we have now, historically, any time in history, there's been a massive increase in productivity. The size of the pie has exponentially just grown. And so that's the part that people are not understanding, that if you have robots that can produce things that are inexpensive, and if you have AI that can create a whole lot more products, then it's just going to get a lot bigger. And then thing we're talking about today, that the AI data centers in space, that creates an entire new space economy, which so that could be much bigger than the Earth's economy. And when you start looking at numbers that big, $100 trillion is easily within the range of possible outcomes.
And Larry, you have any comments there?
No, I mean, I'm aligned 100%. Just think about it this way. Right now, we're confined to an economy based upon the resources of the earth. Another decade or two will be reliant upon the resources available from the moon and ultimately from Mars and potentially from Titan. So, the limits today are very clear, but the limits of tomorrow, when we have an entire population of robots, an entire, couple of planets, triple the number of planets we have now, or quadruple the number of planets we have now, that's the kind of size of the pie. It's pretty self-explanatory.
And how do we get there? Because I saw one stat in your post, Amy, that was like 10 gigawatts is currently what NVIDIA's chips, I guess, are using. And it all boils down to this energy number. So can you walk us through that quick calculation that gets there?
Yes, that's exactly true. So right now, the compute that NVIDIA has is equal to about 10 gigawatt hours if you look at it from the energy standpoint. Elon Musk is talking about doing 100 gigawatt hours in satellites in space just to start. That's just his starting point. And then from there he wants to go to a terawatt, and which is going to be, I believe it was 1,000 times NVIDIA's production, and that's possible from the Earth. Then the limiting factor at that point is going to be rocket fuel. There wouldn't be enough fuel to launch more rockets from the Earth. So then he'll be simultaneously building a moon base. How cool is that? And wants to launch a petawatt off from AI compute from the moon base. And then people are like, well, why would you need that much compute? Like, what are you going to do with it all? But if you think about it, only 16% of the world right now is using AI, and we're just barely scratching the surface of what it can do. So when billions of people start using AI, and then you have all the factories using AI, and the robots using AI, and the autonomous vehicles using AI, you need a source of power and you need a source of compute for that. So it's going to get exponentially bigger, and other companies don't have a plan yet of how they're going to be able to serve billions of people asking the AI model for information. And that's where the restriction is going to come in. What do you think, Larry?
Yeah, I think that firstly, it's not limited to what Elon can do. It's just that Elon is already planning for it and is focusing on it, and he has a very clear path to this petawatt of power.
Yeah.
And so, as usual, he's out ahead, and eventually everybody will get there, will get an understanding. But he's going gangbusters. I mean, he's building, a fab to build the quantum of chips that he's going to need to put 1 million satellites into space. Now, when you make plans of that caliber, it changes everything. I mean, the size of the fab that he's building just beggars anything that's been done in the past. Everything is changed. So he's thinking on a different scale to what everybody else is thinking. Although, NVIDIA just announced that they expect $1 trillion of revenue from their current chips, or their current chip plan. So, he's not entirely alone, but he's definitely thinking, way, way ahead. And we're not talking about 2 or 3 years ahead. We're not even talking 5 years ahead. We're talking 10 and 20 years ahead. In fact, he's probably thinking beyond his lifetime at the moment.
And that's actually perfect segue to the Terafab, which we just got this news announced that the Terafab is starting construction like 7 days or 6 days or 5 days, I guess, from when this comes out. Like, that seemed already when he announced at the shareholder meeting, I think took a lot of people by surprise, including me,
Yeah.
which was like, whoa, Terafab, that seems so far out there. But it sounds like this is actually classic Elon moving it, like he's going to set every record for what kind of chip fab is being built. And even more interesting is the types of chips. Seems to be a lot of these, if you follow kind of what's happening with everything's going to be in space, he could build a chip that's optimized for space. And so that could give him a whole nother layer of the advantage, which I think is a whole interesting angle. So Larry, were you just before we started recording, we're talking about something about they're already clearing land near Giga Texas from Joe's videos that you think is for the Terafab. Is that what you're thinking?
Absolutely am. They've cleared a gigantic piece of land. I think it's larger than the land for the current Gigafactory, and I think that's going to be the Terafab. And there's an enormous amount of land available at Giga Texas. I mean, they've only really exploited about less than a third of it for all the factories they have there right now. So I think what we're going to see is the Terafab on that site. It makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, it's only a few tens of miles from the Samsung factory where, Elon is already walking the floor, learning about fabs, or teaching Samsung about fabs. I'm not sure which is which. And so, it's only a matter of time. I mean, the concentration of factories that Elon has in that very small, triangle between Samsung in Taylor, Texas, and the I guess it's the Gigafactory, and then we have the Starlink factory, which is gigantic as well, and looks like they're going to expand that even further, make thousands, tens of thousands of terminals a day, a day. So, I mean, you just get a sense of the scale that they already have there. And what's interesting to me is, they announced the $20 billion capital expenditure for Tesla this year, and everybody was kind of mystified. How? Why? What? And, a year ago, when everybody wanted them to buy back shares, I said, you guys haven't seen anything yet. That the capital expenditure is going to go through the roof. I made a chart of it, and they're ahead of my chart. Even I was behind them. So they have a lot of capital spend to go, and it's going to change everything. And that really is driving the necessity for a merger of the two major companies in his portfolio.
Ooh,
Right.
okay. Amy, do you have any thoughts on the Terafab?
Oh, I'm incredibly excited about the Terafab. Now, when you look at the advantage that SpaceX and Tesla will get, which will lead into the next topic, of from vertical integration, it is enormous. Everybody else has to go to do a request for proposal, set out a list of requirements, send out tolerances that things can be go back and forth and schedule all these meetings. Tesla and SpaceX can have all the engineers sit in the same room right next to the production line, and they can optimize and they can iterate quickly, and they can deploy products to market years sooner than others will be able to do. I mean, for a lesser price and a higher quality product, it is just an enormous advantage. And not to mention that everybody else, if they're using suppliers, every supplier wants to get a profit on top before it moves on to the next part. So this is going to be a huge advantage that they can now do the chip design integrated with the chip manufacturing.
Are we even questioning whether this is possible at this point? Like, we're just giving Elon the benefit of the doubt that he's going to build a successful fab faster than anyone on Earth?
Larry,
I
you
don't
want to take
know.
that?
Yeah, I do, because I don't know. I mean, I just want to voice the doubts that, people who are in the business of building chips understand that this is one of the most challenging engineering projects that you can imagine. And we all know how long it took for a dry cathode to be successfully produced. 4 years ago, 4 years ago, I was having arguments with some of the Tesla influencers about how quickly the dry electrode battery would be produced. And I was saying, it's going to take a couple of years. And they were saying, no, they're producing it already. It's a done deal. I said, it's going to take, well, it took 4 years. So, it's not going to be a straight and narrow path. It's going to be quite rocky. Look, Samsung several times have nearly gotten bankrupt building fabs. So is Hynix. Hynix today is manufacturing high velocity or high speed memory. That high speed memory they're making bankrupted them. I mean, they were functionally, well, the fire bankrupted them, but they were functionally out of business. And they took this enormous risk, and it took them several years. I think it's taken them almost 3.5 years. And now they're sitting on top of the world in the chip business. It's an incredibly tough business, incredibly risky, and the machinery it needs is incredibly expensive and incredibly hard to source. There's really only one manufacturer. And so to think that Elon may end up making the machines that he has to put into this fab and has to, in order to build the fab, he's taking on what is easily the toughest job of his life. And I'm including, Falcon 9, and I'm including Starship, and I'm including the dry cathode battery, and I'm including I'm including everything. This is easily the hardest task of his life. So we'll see. I mean, he knows something I don't know. He knows a lot of things I don't know. So I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I will say it's going to be tough.
And I tend to be slightly more optimistic on this because of the way that he said he was going to start. So he believes that he can source the machines and use the machines, and he's going to start. He intends to start small and just follow the existing process. So unlike the dry battery cathodes, which had never been done before successfully at large scale, this has been done successfully, and he can just do what he just did with XAI, where he went in and got some talented people, and he can bring them in, so he has some of that institutional knowledge. But I don't think that we'll see it scale necessarily as fast as he would like. But that's okay, because Tesla has, on the Tesla side, they've said they have enough chips for the next 2 years already contracted, and that's with Samsung ramping up that new Texas factory. So there's some roadway here for them to be able to get this done. And then as Tesla's trying to work on the Terafab, meanwhile their suppliers, knowing that the demand is there, will also be ramping up production for Tesla. Because historically what Tesla does is say, give me everything that you can, And then if there's a gap or a shortfall, that's where Tesla will step in to make the difference. So as Tesla's trying to work on this Terafab, the suppliers are going to be trying to lessen Tesla's need to have a Terafab every single year by reducing and meeting more of the need that Tesla has. So I think that it will work out, and I think that he will surprise us in it not being as bad as the worst pessimists are forecasting, because he can, after all, land Starship on chopsticks.
But I do agree. I don't think he's going. I don't think he's going to fail. But I will tell you, even buying the machines from existing suppliers is not really as simple as it sounds, because actually getting them to produce is really a significant challenge. I will tell you that Samsung failed in their Taylor operation, and Elon has been brought in to help them get it back up and running. The history of fabs failing is, there's a long history of that. But and I just wanted to point out the difficulty, just the degree of difficulty of this mountain that he's going to climb. And he's going to have to invent new chips, or certainly new methods of cooling for the chips that he wants to put into satellites, because we are going to have to increase the cooling functionality of these satellites quite dramatically. And I know we're moving on from the chip side to the satellites, to inference in space, but it's each one of these steps are going to be in itself challenging, not to mention building factories on the moon.
Yeah,
The
I
game.
agree. And
Or go for it.
yeah, for as far as the cooling goes, a lot of the numbers that I've seen on that, people are just using the NVIDIA GPUs because that's what they have out there right now. And they're ignoring the fact that Elon Musk's plan is to actually use the hardware from the Tesla vehicles. So those do not require the same level of cooling that the NVIDIA chips do. They also are proved to be quite ruggedized, and furthermore, he's intending to run them at a hotter temperature. So that's the modification that he's already come up with of how he's going to make this work. He's going to make the chips capable of running as hot of a temperature as he can, and then that increases the ability to do the radiative cooling in space. And then on each of these satellites, you can have double-sided cooling surfaces, which also increases the ability to do it. So he's already put some thought into how he can get there. Now they have to actually start manufacturing it. We also know that StarCloud, the conference that NVIDIA is at today, Jensen Huang walked out on stage to the StarCloud satellite launching into orbit. That just happened this morning. Has already designed a satellite that does have enough cooling in it and is running a NVIDIA GPU right now. So it's not an unsolvable problem from the standpoint of physics. But as Larry's mentioning, it's just incredibly ambitious. Ambitious at a scale that other companies simply would not take on. They would not be launching robotaxis and doing Optimus, and then in his other sister business, be trying to send AI compute into orbit. But this is what Elon Musk does, and in retrospect, it will seem obvious to people.
Absolutely.
It's funny to hear the haters about that, because I've been following StarCloud so closely, and it's working. Like I think they launched 5 NVIDIAs, 4 of them are working, and apparently the 5th one was already like not good before they launched it, so they don't think it was the space issue. But talking to StarCloud was interesting, hearing how the NVIDIA chip is so expensive based on the power it consumes, but something like a Bitcoin mining chip would be way cheaper and easier to power. So just like you got me thinking, Amy, with all the wiggle room, where if he's designing it for scratch from this use case being vertically integrated, there's like so many different layers of optimization for what he's doing. And then the fact that, Larry, do you want to jump in? It looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, I think firstly you got to understand they're two separate problem spaces. The one is if you want to do inference, and the other is if you want to do training. Training chips which NVIDIA is the perfect solution, or one of the better solutions. The heat problems are dramatically greater. The energy problems are even more difficult. I don't think Elon is planning on that. I think he's planning on inference because, after all, we are moving from a time of training to a time of inference in terms of the eras of AI. In training chips, you've got a much simpler, you've got much lower heat problems, and the design. You know, if you read the numbers put out by Mark 33, which are really, I think, the most definitive numbers I've seen so far, they figure that there's a path to 100 to be able to actually run those chips flat out in in a configuration that is not that different, by the way, very similar to the current generation, or the about to be launched generation V3 satellites that they're going to be launching on Starship. And Amy's right, there are cooling solutions for that. Even with the cooling solutions that we have today and running only training, we're still a little bit higher than we need to be, even running the chips warmer than, or much warmer than they are supposed to be. But there is a path, a very clear path towards it, and a lot of it turns on, the materials used, and some experimentation that still has to take place. So I'm absolutely convinced that we'll launch those million satellites that Elon's planning for, and I'm absolutely convinced that he will have this gigantic, space-based data center, certainly in your lifetimes. I don't know about my lifetime, but certainly within the next 5 or so years. And that's kind of phase 2. Phase 3 is, actually launching them from the moon, manufacturing them in part on the moon, and launching them in very much larger numbers, using power, the unlimited power of the sun, or relatively unlimited power of the sun, and making this million satellite, solution trivial compared to what he's going to do from the moon. So his plans are even greater than these almost unthinkable plans, which he just hinted at the shareholder meeting and blew our minds.
Wow, this is crazy. So I didn't want to. Well, I feel like I want to talk about the digital Optimus thing because that's tying into this, but it's almost like such a lame, tiny amount of chips compared to what we're talking about now. But there was an inkling of a much bigger idea, I feel like, when Elon was tweeting about this idea of digital Optimus using the car's computers while they're not like working, essentially. That seems like a huge, huge deal. So what went through your heads when you saw this news? Maybe, Amy, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I think that this is brilliant and an example of what makes Elon Musk so different. So he's been aware for a very long time that energy was going to be a limiting factor for AI. And he looks out there and he's like, well, I have a whole supercharger network. So he's going to leverage his supercharger network. He's going to leverage the chips that he spent every Saturday, and I think it was part of every Tuesday, designing himself, which, to go to what Larry was talking about, Tesla is right now using their inference chips in Cortex on a 1-to-2 ratio and using them for training as well as just inference. And Elon Musk has talked about the idea of putting not this version, just the AI 4, but maybe once you get up to AI 6, putting several of them on a board and calling that Dojo 3. So he does see when he has the chance to optimize the chip for exactly what he needs and not have to put everything on it he doesn't, the way that NVIDIA has to do a more generalized chip, that he could make this something that could be useful for both training and for inference is the game plan. And the start of that is he's going to figure out exactly what he does need and what the requirements are by putting a bank of AI 4 chips next to these superchargers, and at night the superchargers are not used very much, so they'll be doing Everything that you do on a keyboard, Digital Optimus should be able to do. And the other interesting thing is it's an architecture designed to start limiting calls to the LLM, which nobody else has that figured out yet either. And so it's the idea he was getting at was MACROHARD, replacing the need for all this ERP software by having the AI just instinctively know what to do. And we don't know that many details about it, but what we do know is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, when he talked about putting the chips in the into the supercharger network, I gave some thought to the cooling problems, because you can't put a big cooling tower, in a parking lot, or in some of the places where, say, an underground charging installation. So there's a lot of engineering issues, and it's going to require a lot of optionality and ideas. But it's a brilliant idea. I mean, certainly the car network is very eminently usable, and then to be able to add chips to the supercharger network. And then I started thinking about, well, actually they're cooling the superchargers all the time. There's a water cooled I guess, circuit in these superchargers. Maybe they use that and actually put the chips into the supercharger devices
Yeah.
themselves. Just a fascinating engineering problem, or challenge. But man, it just gets better and better and better. It bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better and better. It's an amazing idea.
And this macro hard concept seems very important potentially because it's a joke with Microsoft, which is like the world's largest company, or, 4 trillion. So, and now he's officially announcing it's a joint Tesla SpaceX XAI project, which to me cements the merger almost, but also got me super pumped as a Tesla investor of like, at first it was kind of XAI, but now it seems like, and I can't even really wrap my head around what is this Digital Optimus project? What does MacroHard even look like? Like, how does it generate actual revenue? I've been trying to think of that. And then at the same time, watching what my friends are doing with Claude and their agents kind of work autonomously. My friend was trying to describe this thing of the way Claude interacts with a website different than we do by tapping into like the APIs. And I don't even know. It's a little over my head, but I've been trying. To me, it seems like where this is going is essentially it's going to be a super agents. Like that's the consumer feature that is part of it. But I don't know if that makes sense. I'm kind of curious. How do we go? Because I was looking at Tesla. I'm like, okay, our revenue was down from last year. We're at 95 billion. Like when we have so much excitement and crazy stuff, like when does this actually turn into like billions of business, and how does that actually kind of manifest?
Well, you want to go, Amy?
Sure. Yes, I think that describing it as an agent is the most intuitive way for people to be able to understand how this is going to work. Basically, it's going to be divided into two parts. One of the part is going to be looking at 5 seconds of what's happening on the screen, and then from that 5 seconds, the other part is going to be figuring out what to do. So it's very similar to um, a navigation system is the way that Elon Musk described it, where it has a general route of where it wants to get, but then it's looking turn by turn what's in front of you. Does it need to move? Does it need to adjust? Does it need to go to the can it go on the way it thought, or does it need to do a detour? That's a good way to kind of think of how this would work. So basically, anything that you can do on a keyboard, the software will be able to figure out. It will have the general idea of what it wants to accomplish and the steps it should take to do it. But as it's doing those things, the same way that you would react and change what you're doing based on what you're seeing, it will be reacting and changing what it's doing based on what it's seeing. So over time, this can become powerful enough if you have many agents that can do many specialized tasks. You can replace out every form of ERP software that's out there. So you're not just going after Microsoft, you're going after Oracle, you're going after Salesforce, you're going after every single one of them. This is another way that you get to $100 trillion company, because the AI will just eat software. You won't need it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, AI is already in a place where it could eat software, but companies are very loath and diffident about actually putting it into action. Those days are going to be over soon enough. We're going to get into this next stage where we'll see truly agentic software being implemented. And if you own shares in SAP or Oracle, well, Oracle's trying to do a hardware play as well. But if certainly SAP, I'm not sure they're going to be around. And these gigantic companies that they're toast. But actually, the digital twin for the humanoid robot, when we think about that, just think about the car and what it's doing right now. And obviously, the robot has many, many more degrees of freedom. So it has a larger challenge in terms of the number of degrees of freedom and all the things it can do, if you wish. On the other hand, the car, the level of safety requirement for the car, the criticality of every single decision it makes every second or every sub-second is very, very, very high risk. Whereas the robot has got a lot more freedom in terms of danger and it's the risks that it's taking. So there's a trade-off there in terms of the degrees of freedom and complexity for the robot in thinking through its next actions and what actions and its plan as a whole. But on the other hand, it's not as critical as the car. So there's a lot of commonality, but those differences also will talk to the road forward in terms of training. We know that it took 4 years to get to this point, or even more, to get to this point, maybe 10 years to get to this point in being able to control the car completely autonomously. So we've built a huge foundation, but the challenge is somebody worked out, I think it was ARC, worked out that there are 200,000 times more complex, more degrees of freedom or more activity that has to be divined for the robot as for the car. But on the other hand, I said to them, look, it may be 200,000 times, but it's probably 1,000 times less critical. So really the number is really in the 200 range. But even in the 200 range, it's going to take a lot of training, huge amount of training. And remember, it took us these 4 years or 10 years or some very long period of time when we started with a car, jerkily trying to get around a corner to where it's driving smoothly and beautifully. That's the challenge. And the more compute we can get, the more robots we can get out there, the more video we can get, the more we can train, And so the more chips that we have operating wherever they are in the cars right now, when the cars are, in the garage, and then ultimately that we can get up into space and or get into these charging networks, we're going to need every one of them in order to get these robots to become, really useful.
I think that Larry's example was really good because that kind of feeds into my experience as an airline pilot. But what I would say is the and I was a flight instructor too. The most difficult rating for people is their private pilot because everything is new. They don't even know what a half mile from the runway looks like at 1,000-foot pattern altitude. So it can take them a very long time to get their private pilot. Now I fly 787. The airplane is infinitely more complex. But to go from a 767 to flying a 787 was not actually that difficult, even though the airplane has duplicative hydraulic systems. It handles pneumatics in a completely different way in pressurizing the aircraft with a giant air compressor rather than taking bleed air off the engines. There's all these differences, but the training was quite smooth because I had a framework of how I was going to go about doing this. And I think that for Tesla, is going to have a huge advantage in training the robots that other manufacturers don't have because of the journey that they went on with FSD. So they already have figured out how to do 3D real world practical AI in a way that other people are just working on foundation models. And this is a very different and difficult task, as Larry says. If you think of, because it has to consider second order effects. Because if you think of when you're in the car, if you brake, you braking is going to create second order effects where the cars around you are going to react to your braking, and now you're going to have to change the next thing that you do. That's exactly the case with the robotics. That's something that a foundation model really doesn't have to do. It can come up with its answer. You might ask it a question, it might change its answer, but it isn't considering what are you going to do, and that's changing and narrowing down its options. And Tesla having experience with this, I think, is going to be a huge advantage. They also know what really worked for them in training FSD, and we started seeing that the updates coming with these dramatic changes from update to update to update, where it's just getting so much smoother and so much better. And they know what those tricks were that they used to do that. So I think that it's going to surprise people. There's also an opportunity with robotics to deploy it first in more limited manner. First get it good enough just for a production line, then get it good enough for help with the laundry, and to narrow down the tasks that you're doing with it, and then move onward from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that having the pattern of developing FSD and applying that pattern to the robot is going to give them a huge leg up. As you say, it's like flying. Of course, I never quite made it. I mean, my experience flying, Amy, I just got to take my hat off to you. Amazing.
So, okay, yeah, great analogy, Amy. That was interesting. I'm curious with thinking through like hearing both of you talk got me thinking about how much compute we're going to need to pull this off, and then backing into the financial calculations, because I feel like we have all the ingredients here for Elon to do this. We got the rockets, he's going to make the chips, he's got the humanoids, but the one missing ingredient right now is cash, it seems like. So, and that's, Larry, you've been way ahead of the curve saying Elon is going to have to do a massive capital raise and there's huge amounts of cash commitments. So I'm kind of curious, there's so much up in the air right now with how the SpaceX IPO is going to happen, if this merger is going to go through before then. But it seems like the North Star here is both of Elon's companies need huge amounts of cash ASAP, basically, to invest in these projects. So what's your take on how this is going to play out? Are we going to have SpaceX IPO raising $50 billion, or do you think there's a merger that's going to take place before so they can start to raise more into the hundreds of billions of range? Because it seems like this is going to be a big part of the story is raising these hundreds of billions to make it happen.
Yeah, Elon is not going to raise hundreds of billions. That's not Elon's style. So SpaceX is going to go out. There's nothing that's going to stop this public issue for SpaceX. It's on the track. It's on the way down the track. I doubt he'll stop it at this point. I think it'll go on. He's going to raise about $50 billion. It'll happen on June 26th, maybe, but around that time. That's his birthday, and that's kind of the target date. And the interesting thing is, it's not going to be much of a lockup. In fact, I don't think there's going to be a lockup at all. And the reason for that is that they're going to be in the indexes within 3 to 6 weeks. That is to say, they're going to be indexed into the either the S&P or the NASDAQ or both. And if they are indexed in them, then they need enormous liquidity of stock. There's going to be gigantic demand for that stock. And so 50 billion won't even touch sides. So they're going to go public at the end of June. I think the stock price is going to go up by a very significant amount. I mean, I'm trying to be conservative and say it's going to be like 50%.
Give us the bull case too, Larry, because that demand thing you mentioned is crazy with the
It is.
indexes changing all their rules, having to buy SpaceX. That could be like $100 billion of demand on the stock right away from
Well,
out of
100 bill
nowhere.
of demand is nothing. No, it's going to be a lot more than 100 bill. A lot more. The demand for stock is, in my judgment, is going to be in the 300 to 400 billion range. So I think that overnight the stock is going to go from its current 1.25 trillion to around 2.5 trillion, in that range. And I'm not the only one to say that. I have friends, good friends in Morgan Stanley. They're feeding me these numbers as well. I'm not guessing in a vacuum here. That's my guess. So what we're going to see is a sympathetic rise of the Tesla stock. Nobody's realized this, but there's going to be an indexed relationship between the Tesla stock and the SpaceX stock. And what is the indexed relationship? The current market cap of Tesla, which is in the $1 trillion range, and the current market cap of SpaceX, which is in the $1.25 trillion. If SpaceX goes public in the $2 trillion range, we're going to see Tesla rise to the $1.5 trillion range. Of that, I'm certain. Why? Because everybody realizes by now that very shortly after the IPO, within months at most, we will see a merger of those two companies at the current price, at the current market price of both companies. That's my sense of it.
Amy,
Yeah.
go for it. I want to dive into that, how the merger happens, but let's focus on the
Yeah.
IPO first.
Yeah, I think that there could be a second, two groups of investment bankers, one that's pitching an IPO strategy and one that's pitching a merger strategy, and they're competing with each other.
I love that. A bake off.
That's not unheard of in this type of financial situation. Then it just kind of comes down to which group of investment bankers presents a more compelling argument. From the standpoint of the employees, IPOs are a good thing, but they're a distraction. Mergers are, in this case, would be a very good thing. Also a distraction. It's expensive to pay investment bankers twice. So there's a slight possibility that that they could go public as a merger in that standpoint. But I really don't know because that's, of course, I'm not getting information from Morgan Stanley or anyone else. I'm just looking at what makes sense from a business standpoint. And a business standpoint, in whatever way the transaction goes down, I just don't see any way that we don't have these two companies merged now. That Tesla and SpaceX have to be merged because we have too many really significant, big, huge joint bets that are going on. Digital Optimus just being the newest one, the Terafab with Tesla producing the chips for SpaceX. And as we were talking about earlier, there is a huge advantage to being your own customer. When you're your own customer, you can optimize your design, you can optimize the production line for your design, and you can have all those engineers sit in the same room. And the last thing we want them doing is keeping timesheets, trying to allocate what time was spent on Tesla and what time was spent on SpaceX. That's just going to be an unnecessary thing that slows them down. And I think that a lot of people, when they think about a merger, they just assume there's a static opportunity, that we're just dividing the pie into more pieces. But once again, that they would not merge to keep Tesla on track to be an $8 trillion company. They would not merge to keep SpaceX on track to be an $8 trillion company. They would merge because there's an opportunity to become a $100 trillion company that is just simply way too large to pass up, that changed everything. And because of that, now the missions have converged on the same mission of like an AI space and robotics company, and they each have very necessary pieces of the puzzle. No one company can do this on their own. It's going to require all of them, and it's just too big to think about sitting on the sidelines and letting someone else do it instead.
what she said.
And it seems like in Elon's head, it's already merged. I'm not sure if you feel that way, but just the way he's
Yeah.
been talking about it and framing and moving everything so quickly, to me it's and we always know Elon's optimistic. For him, oh, we're going to merge at some point. Obviously, we can get it done. He's already thinking 10 steps ahead of that. So, I feel like yeah, to me, the writing's on the wall. Like when I saw this digital Optimus thing and the Terafab without a mention of whether it's SpaceX or Tesla, I'm like, is that the announcement of the merger when they say the Terafab is I think we're like, I don't know. So I'm curious what Larry's going to say about how the merger will occur if the normal IPO happens. I don't know. Maybe that's even just too boring of a subject because it's easy, but I am genuinely curious because I think there's never been a merger this big.
Yeah, that is true, but I do think that the idea that they would merge as part of the IPO is probably not even practical at the moment, simply because the complexities of that are very great, particularly as they have to raise money at the same time. So we're talking about levels of complexity that are very difficult. One of the reasons that they'll want to actually end up as SpaceX, not as Tesla, is because Elon already has controlling shares in SpaceX. He's got these special shares. You can't create those shares if you're already, a company that exists. That you can't change your share um, type to give somebody control once you already exist. So it's not possible to do it in Tesla. You can only do it in SpaceX. Now, could you merge them and then go public? Yeah, but it's a little late for that, because if you start a merger with Tesla now, you'll need a vote of shareholders by Tesla, and that's going to take about 3 months to get an S1 out, to get a special general meeting. And so that's going to push you way past June, way past June. It would take several months to put the documentation together. Then you've got 90 days to get. So I think that's impractical. So honestly, the fastest route forward to getting the $50 billion in the bank, getting SpaceX listed, is to go with the S1 that they've already prepared, get the June date done. We're only 3-4 months out now. We wouldn't have time to get started on another plan. And then once you've done that and you've placed the shares and the market has settled on a price, and we'll see the Tesla price move accordingly, then the merger can be done incredibly quickly. Incredibly quickly. The long pole in the tent will remain the shareholder approval of the Tesla investors, but there won't be any long pole relating to the S1 for the new company. None of that will happen. There'll be a very straightforward offer, and they can start operating, very shortly after that, as if they're one company.
Wow. So it would make sense for SpaceX to buy Tesla. Tesla
Yeah.
shareholders have to vote to approve that.
Yeah, I did an analysis, and I did some numbers that shows how the shares would be issued by SpaceX to the Tesla shareholders, what the total would look like at the end, what Elon's control would look like. He'd have absolute control of the final product. The only open issue is what we do with these options. That's a very big issue, by the way. It's not easily overcome, and there are some ways forward. But bottom line is, it would be much simpler to do, and it could be done by year end. But functionally, the companies can start operating as if it's happened.
Wow. This is like blowing my mind because it's on one hand, it's such an ambitious project. And it's almost like capitalism is working here. Like, I can't even think, is China going to deploy hundreds of billions of dollars for any initiative? Like, the amount of capital that is being deployed ahead of time for such an ambitious vision, I feel like is something like we've never seen before. honestly. Like what other country has a plan to double the output of the world economy within 10 years? Like, has that even ever happened in history? Probably not. So I just feel like it's kind of crazy. Like Larry's like, oh, 100 billion's nothing. There's going to be 400 billion flown into this. It's like, that's insane to think about how much, in some ways, the marketing that Elon has done to secure these resources to be able to have a, like, it's almost like if he wasn't Elon Musk and you heard another guy say this, it's like, dude, this is just not going to happen. But I don't know. So I feel like sometimes I have to pinch myself for how crazy this is and how fast it's moving. I don't know if you have any ideas on that, or like, taking a step back to think about where this sits in history at all.
I think it's absolutely enormous. It's going to create the goal here is to create a whole new space economy. So we were before limited by the confines of the Earth. And Earth, it's not just going to start out with, it's going to start with orbital satellites. Then it's going to go to a moon base. Then you can start going beyond the moon. Of course, Mars is a plan, and then you can even go interstellar. So like it's really an ambitious plan, and it comes off of being able to harness the energy of the sun. We're getting rid of fundamental constraints that Earth had that was going to limit the max that you could grow the output on Earth. So not in no time in history has there been anything similar, except you've had things that have been transformative to the way people lived. Certainly, like when the cavemen discovered fire, and like there's times where there's been also huge leaps in the ability of people to live and have safety and other things like that. But at no point will there have been such an enormous explosive growth in GDP as we're about to see.
So I just want to give you some context here. Hynix, it was like the number 4 manufacturer of chips, and it was close to bankrupt. They're the manufacturer of these very fast memory chips, high-speed memory chips. They're building a very large fab complex in China and in Korea, South Korea right now. What do you think they're investing in their fab, in this fab complex?
20
Billions.
Not billions, not tens of billions, $400 billion.
Wow.
So you have to take the perspective that you have here is that we're rebuilding the Earth's economy. We're rebuilding everything. You'd have to go back to the end, the 1860s. You'd have to combine the railroad development, electrical generation, the telephone, put them all together, and you still won't get to where we are going right now. We're changing everything about human civilization. And so hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds, maybe $1 trillion is the kind of capital that you're looking at when you're thinking of taking, generation of power, of energy to space and then to interstellar space. It's a gigantic undertaking. So, Tesla's $40 billion. And that's what's amazing about Elon Musk. Nobody understands just how capital efficient he is. There is nothing like him in the world. These companies that invest these hundreds of billions of dollars, I mean, Elon's doing it with like pennies on the dollar. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he does it. I mean, I hope I live to see these satellites in space, because I think that everybody's projection is going to end up being wrong. And Amy's going to be right, actually. It's going to be less investment than we think, but it's going to be massive.
And Elon's got a secret friend helping him on all this, which is, to me, the biggest X factor, and super meta, which is Grok. Like,
Yeah.
like Grok is turbocharging engineering. He was probably up till 4 a.m. with Grok. Like, well, how do we get more of this? The lunar driver on the moon. It's like, I don't know. Some of them, I think it's like a funny joke, but I'm like, actually, in my life, Grok has become such a turbo for what is possible. I feel like that is almost like the special like stardust in Elon's lap that is going to make this all possible in a way.
100%. There's no question about it it, that if you look at Starship, it is going to be unusual, and will have been something designed primarily by man, and everything that comes after this will be designed primarily as a partnership between man and AI, and very soon after that, it will be primarily designed by AI, with man just thinking that we're helping a little bit, So it's really going to be a huge change, but that with using Grok, you should be able to find the inefficiencies a lot quicker and flag where those are. And Tesla's manufacturing process, if you look at just what they do with the cars, the very first thing they do is hook up the computer in the car, and then as the parts go on, they verify that that's the right part. So that they have this ability of quality control that is baked into the system. And when you add an AI into that loop, now you're going to be able to not have to go produce a whole batch of chips to discover that the power wasn't there or that there was a problem with the first part. Hopefully, AI is going to be able to flag that for you immediately. You're going to iterate it, you're going to fix it. Maybe you'll take a few days off on the line or you're not producing anything, but you're not going to have that enormous level of waste. So get to the end and then discover it didn't work. And so that's one of the reasons why I think that the capital expenditure is going to be less and the time is going to be less than people think it was. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be very difficult. But Elon Musk will always make something that's difficult happen if he thinks it's necessary to get it done.
But he will be late.
Well, I don't think he's even given a specific time frame on this one. He's just given what the order of steps that he wants to take without saying which time they're going to be done.
Which is almost.
But whenever
smart.
he gives us a time scale, he will be late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I almost like that there's no crazy time scale on it because it feels like, I don't know, that's gotten into trouble before, but you also got to motivate the people. I don't know. So
Yeah.
I like the way he puts those time scales down because everybody understands they set a goal and people march to that goal. It's not like they don't take notice of it. So it's been very successful for him, very successful, and it gives the short sellers the ability to waste their money on him. I mean, they definitely haven't figured out the game yet.
No. The one time frame we know that he's done is he's told Tesla and SpaceX each to come up with 100 gigawatts hours of solar. Is it gigawatts or gigawatt hours? That one.
it's going to be awesome that Tesla's getting into that. That's a whole other angle.
Yeah.
But I don't want to take more time from you two, the two legends we've got on today. This has been such a fun conversation. And I feel like we're just getting started. Like this is going to be a crazy next few years. So anything that you want to say to the HyperChange people or about the Elon SpaceX XAI Tesla merger before we let you go? Amy, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I would say that to Larry's point, the investment bankers have a path and the board has a path and they have information available to them that we don't. We're not going to be able to determine what the deal mechanics are. If we are so lucky, all we're going to have is a chance to vote yes or no. So don't waste a lot of time quibbling about could the valuation have been $300 million this way or the share exchange value this percentage rather than that percentage, because the opportunity here is to not have a company that would grow to 8 trillion. The opportunity is to have your same investment, the dollars you have invested will not change in a company that could grow to $100 trillion. So any of us would take that deal every single day of the week. So there'll be a lot of people, if this is announced, that try and say, but if it had been announced 2 months ago, it would have been this value, or if it was, announced 3 months, if it was announced 3 months in the future, it would be this value. That's a useless game. Yeah, our vote is yes or no, and my vote is resoundingly yes.
Great point. There's going to be the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. So,
Yeah.
So what she said, I mean, absolutely nailed it. You trying to game the Tesla shares with how it gets bought and how it get and whether SpaceX will take value from Tesla. This is just noise. It's pointless. It's going to be. I mean, firstly, the guys who are going to set the values, the relative values, are going to be independent bankers. It'll be fine. The value of your Tesla shares when it's SpaceX / Tesla as opposed to just Tesla is just going to be so much greater. It's just incredible. The story that a lot of people are saying, well, we're just getting started. We shouldn't be selling now. We should be selling, in 3 years' time when this and this and this and this has happened. Well, guess what? SpaceX has got this and this and this is going to happen. And when we put the two together, many more steps are going to happen much faster, and we're all going to benefit from it. So it's exactly what Amy said.
awesome. Well, can't wait for that. And I'll be voting yes, too. I think those are some great, that's the last almost hurdle. There will be a whole drama around that. So, everyone go follow Larry and Amy. Thank you so much for joining. I had a blast. Two people that I really respect and that know the space so well. So this was like awesome. I love following you both on X and all your ideas. So really appreciate the time.
Thanks. It was great to be on.
Thanks, Larry. Happy late birthday to Larry, too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Happy
Coming up.
birthday.